Could Tua Tagovailoa be the next quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings? I brought in Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins to discuss.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Vikings fans? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Kyle from Locked On Dolphins. Been trying to put this together for a little bit because I've become completely and utterly fascinated with so many facets of the Miami Dolphins. The Vikings hire Frank Smith. Tua Tagovailoa is very much an option for a Vikings team that is openly looking for a veteran quarterback that's not Joe Flacco, that's looking for somebody that actually can start, can be your guy, has a chance to, actually lead this team. And the first thing, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong here, the situation in Miami is that Tua is done in Miami. He's going somewhere else one way or another. Is there any chance for a reconciliation where Tua stays in Miami?
I think the fact that they kind of flush the rest of the system does leave like that very, very, very small incremental possibility that they go through this process. It sounds like they're intent on trying to facilitate some kind of trade, which is inevitably going to require them eating a significant amount of salary. That, in all likelihood, necessitates that this is going to have to go into the summertime and past like June 1st, because he's $45.5 million in dead cap. And then you would have to tack on whatever you're paying in the salary. And they're probably going to have to pay the vast majority of the $54 million. So now you're getting up into like 60, 70, 75, and they're moving on for Bradley Chubb. And they're taking they've got $75 million in dead cap right now. Right. So if they're serious about the trade, it's probably going to get pushed out into the summertime. And if they get out that far and they've already ate the money and the draft doesn't break in a favorable way and they don't get a market, maybe they can look themselves in the face and say, you know what, we're paying them the money. We didn't get the guy that we wanted. We didn't get Malik Willis. We didn't draft that guy on day 2 that we were hoping to see. Let's just keep him for another year. Like I think it's the least likely of outcomes that you could have right now, though.
Right, where you just kind of say, look, this year there's so much dead money on it. We just got rid of the whole roster. Where this year is dead. Might as well let him, be the undead ship captain, the Captain Barbosa of this sinking ship, and let and then get rid of him, trade him, cut him, whatever, when the contract is a lot easier to deal with next year. I thought that was a better option too. Before Miami cut everybody, if you're unfamiliar, they release Tyreek Hill, they release Bradley Chubb, they release a couple other players.
Yeah.
So where is Miami's head at then with the trade? Is this just about who's willing to take on the most money? Or is it like, what kind of draft compensation are we thinking of here?
Yeah, I can't imagine, if I've heard the numbers kind of thrown around, if they could save just like 5 or 10 million, they would consider it to be a win. So if you're eating that much amount of the money, you're probably hoping for a late mid-round pick instead of like a day 2 pick. Like maybe you're thinking 4th, 5th round. If you're eating $40 to 45 to $50 million off of the contract, because that the new team would be getting at discount, and then
it's a big favor.
Yeah. And then you get the buyout option where, that new team has $3 million in 2027 money that is going to guarantee invests on the 5th day of the league year this year. So the buyout would only be $3 million next offseason if things didn't go well. I think far more likely you're maybe looking at a pick swap exchange because I'm sure teams are going to be hesitant to giving meaningful draft capital up in a scenario like this. There's a lot of other veteran bridge quarterbacks that I think kind of cuts Miami down at the knees a little bit, with the Kyler Murray situation, the Geno Smith situation, the Kirk Cousins situation. Like,
you can pull Derek Carr out of retirement.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of options,
a lot less,
significantly less money involved. Never mind a draft pick for a lot of those guys. So I think that's where for Miami, tempering expectations and say, hey, if we get an early day 3 pick and we save $10 million, we probably feel really good about how it played out.
So with that being the case, obviously that's all going to happen in a negotiation behind closed doors. We don't really get to report a lot on it. But I'm more fascinated with just what happened here with Tua. Obviously, the Flores years, what happened when Flores was the head coach and Tua was there is very well documented. But what happened after? And I know the stories about these things tend to come out a year or two later when there's not as much pressure on it and everybody can speak freely because nobody works there anymore. So I'm going to be really fascinated with this because as I went in to watch a little bit of Miami, both to say, hey, I know that trading for Tua is an option here for the Vikings, and but also that they just signed Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator. And I do want to ask you a little bit about that, maybe later in the show if we have time. And just watching that offense and when it worked, like going back to 2022 and watching that just absolute supernova of an offense just dunking on the Ravens. And then going to this year and watching it struggle against the Colts, doing a lot of the same stuff. It's so hard for me to put together, like, what changed? What happened? Because it's not like, well, everybody got injured this year, or, they lost the Ben Johnson that was the magic man for the, it's not like that. It was a lot of the same stuff and they ran it back over and over and over and just kind of decayed with a lot of the same dudes. So what is your perception as to why Tua Tagovailoa declined so much from his first year with Mike McDaniel to his last?
Yeah, so there's a couple layers to this, and it's part of what makes the Tua situation so complicated. But part of it was what you yourself just said, and that is a lot of the same stuff, right? They had a hard time building effective pitches off. It's like a pitcher with one pitch, right? It's okay. I can get this batter out, but if I'm into my second and my third time through the lineup, and I don't have that other complementary pitch to change pace with you with or attack you in a different way, everybody kind of knows the sweet spots where Miami wants to attack, right? If you go high post and they've got speed, they're going to take shots down the sideline. If you play 2 high shells and you play cover 2 and you're trying to run match principles, they're going to run those in breakers at 10 to 15 yards in between the hash and the numbers, right? Miami got overwhelmingly more zone coverage than, like, teams just stopped playing man. And it was, we're just going to sit in your landmarks. We're going to take your preferred area and window of the field away, and we're going to force you into what we feel are more low percentage throws to other areas of the field. Or alternatively, we're going to force you to be exceptionally patient and methodically work your way down the field. And that's what they did in 24 when
it totally neutralizes all the speed.
Yes.
When you do that. Yeah.
And then it forces Tua, who is a really good anticipatory throw and has great accuracy, but when it comes time to drive a throw into the intermediate areas of the field or the deeper areas of the field with velocity, because it's a tight window throw, they don't have guys that are 50-50 ball catchers. And his arm strength shows up in that area because he can't drive the throws. And then he physically himself did not look like the same version of himself this year. And like what was already kind of at best baseline felt like it was below that threshold. And now teams started saying when Tyreek Hill goes down, they say, oh, okay, well, now we'll play man coverage and we'll dare you to drive tight window throws with less speed on the field. And we can roll the coverage towards one guy. And he didn't have the juice to drive the tight window throws, or he was seeing it later. So the anticipation and the release wasn't where it needed to be to get the ball in on schedule.
So there's all kinds of fascinating parts of this. And there's things that I feel like it's bunk science, but I can't help but think about the injuries that Tua has suffered over his career and impact that those will have on his body, but also a long history of concussions and the impacts that would have on his vision and his processing. Do you think there's anything to that?
Without saying too much, yeah. I think that there's some level of that probably is just another layer to the onion here that you have to do your legwork on. And because he had the most recent concussion was in week 2 against the Bills in 2024. And he went on IR with what he had. I mean, he was out and about the following day. It was kind of reported that he didn't feel like he had any lingering symptoms other than what had happened that night. But it was an IR stint. And that They talked about how they kind of changed his nutrition program and his hydration and what he ate. And they tried to mess with a whole bunch of stuff to kind of give him that Sidney Crosby treatment, where Crosby with the Penguins had all these concussion issues early in his career. And they made some dietary changes to try to change it. And it was certainly a big part of his offseason program. But you feel like a large part of that came at the expense of the rigors of a physical offseason of intense training to kind of keep your baseline physical skills up too. So that's kind of been part of like the breadcrumbs, as everybody's trying to feel out, how much of it drop off is because of the dislocated hip he had in 2019 at Alabama. How much of the regression's been, he himself said, like at a podium this past season, he doesn't run the way that he used to. And he talked about his ankles because he had the tightrope procedure on both his ankles in college.
Yeah, you can see it. He's definitely slower than he was a few years ago.
So all of it is kind of just a big myriad of questions and things that you have to vet. And I think that's why, any team that's going to have this conversation, they're banking on Tua, or banking on the Dolphins to absorb the vast majority of the risk, because you don't know, is there a bounce back possible, or is this physical version of him the new baseline for which he's going to be operating?
I want to try to find that bounce back. I want to try to find the world where maybe he gets a new change of scenery and it's perfect and everything. What does it have to look like? We'll get to that next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season does not have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out what number goes in what box, instead of worrying about, am I doing my deductions right? Am I going to get in trouble because I did it wrong? Let somebody who knows what they're doing handle everything. They'll find all the deductions that you maybe couldn't find, and you can have all the confidence in the world that this is being done properly, and you're going to be good to go at the end. Upload your documents and go about your day. And if you want updates, you can get them right in the TurboTax app, and you can access your tax expert whenever you want. If you have a question, if you just want to check in, they are there for you. It's a huge time saver, and it gives you peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it, and you can be as involved as you want or don't want. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want to go ad-free, you can with the Locked On Vikings, or Locked On Dolphins if you rather, Everydayer Club. Just go to lockedonvikings.supercast.com, and for $5 a month or $50 a year, which if you're good at math, that's cheaper, you can get ad-free episodes of Locked On Vikings, access to a special Discord server where we Locked On hosts are cutting it up all the time, and much more. Kyle, there's a lot of problems with Tua as a quarterback, and that's why it didn't work out in Miami. And there's a lot of problems in Miami that have nothing to do with Tua, and it's hard to differentiate all of those things.
Yes.
So I want to try to put together what the situation would have to be for Tua to succeed, and then we can compare that and see, okay, is that what is going on in Minnesota? And this is all without getting into the fact that Flores is in Minnesota and what would happen there. But Flores is just running the defense. So like these guys wouldn't actually have to work closely together like at all. A lot of teams, defensive coordinator and the quarterback barely talk. And not to mention Frank Smith, Miami's offensive coordinator, is in Minnesota. So if Minnesota is truly a match, these guys will know. These guys know this guy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What is the best fit for Tua Tagovailoa? What is the kind of situation that brings out the best in him and turns him back into a guy that was, getting MVP consideration around October of 2022?
Yeah, I think that has to involve a little bit more. There's a balance that you have to walk, I think, with the Shanahan style offenses. And it was a big critique in San Francisco. And you saw it, I thought, especially and exceptionally the last 2 years in Miami, with some of the pass concepts. They just want you to trust that they're going to call the right play and rip the ball to the primary. Like they will use
paint by numbers,
two clear out routes to run one primary route. And then the other two is a balloon swing in the backfield where you've got the tight end of the fullback who's running a swing route, but to block for the check down is the swing route out of the backfield. So it's really like a 1-2 opportunity. And that, for whatever reason, this year, it felt as though Tua really struggled with the confidence in a lot of those tight primaries. And it felt like a lot of that probably went back to some of that physical regression from what was already kind of just like at best baseline, right? So you can open it up, and I think a little bit more spacing. I think a little bit more, I don't know if it has to be pure progression reads, but a little bit more in the way of options to allow him to work through eligibles and kind of go 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, or work my way half field 1 to 2 to check down, or give him a little bit more in the way of places to go with the ball.
As opposed to, this is the guy, find a way to get it.
This is the primary, make it work in there with your timing and your ability to layer throws and throw with accuracy. Yeah. And if not,
or move the launch point and get an angle on it if you have to.
Right. So I think that's the thing that you have to, whoever takes him on is going to have to find the balance of, because I don't think he's like super twitchy to have the time to go 1 to 3, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 a ton and do like the Joe Burrow style empty protections all the time. So you have to be able to do your play action. Love to see them get back to a little bit more RPOs. And then your drop back passing game, I think, has to be a lot more diversified than what it was with Mike McDaniel.
I wonder what we would see if Tua was in Minnesota to that end, because I hear a lot of the same stuff that I would probably say about what JJ McCarthy needs, which is, a more pure simplified progression that doesn't have like a double move in it, that doesn't have, and we're buying time for this. And, that where it's just clear what the order is, where it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whether it's across the field or long to short or whatever you want to call it. Rather than, in versus cover 3, you alert to this, and versus cover 2, you alert to that. And like, maybe to dumb it down a little bit just because he's so young. But with Tua, that for different reasons, the same kind of adjustment could happen. And I just don't know if Kevin O'Connell's going to make it, because that's just not what he wants to be. He wants to be the kind of guy that finds the busted coverage and goes deep 20 times a game. But I do want to talk about, speaking of going deep, I do want to talk about the arm strength, because O'Connell wants to be an explosive hunter. Mm-hmm. And I think Tua, in general, has that mentality where he wants to be an explosive hunter. But in the last couple of years, he's dialed back on that quite a bit. And like, in terms of depth of target, the Dolphins went down every year of Mike McDaniel's tenure there, which I find fascinating, because it seems like Tua was at his best when it was, let's grip it and rip it and take shots all the time. Do you still feel like that is the way that Tua wants to play? And then I have another weird conspiracy I need you to talk me out of.
Yeah. Going back to college, he was great running like the verticals concepts and pushing the ball down the field. And, early in, it's kind of that progression that a lot of young quarterbacks go through. It felt like it didn't start with Tua until Mike got there. But like, every defensive coordinator comes in and says, I'm going to blitz the hell out of him, right? Like, we're going to pressure him, and we're going to, and
yeah, you want to throw 20 yards? Good luck. Yeah.
Yeah. And teams tried that with Miami early, and lo and behold, they had more speed on the field. They created more cushion, and his release was exceptionally fast, and anticipation was his best trait. So when teams tried to pressure early in the McDaniel era, they paid for it. And he really crushed the blitz, because the ball would get out so quick to the point where teams would just be defeated and say, we're not going to bother trying to blitz him, because we're not going to get there before the ball gets out in 2.2 seconds. We're just not going to get home.
Yeah.
But that kind of came at the cost of going back to teams having more awareness of where do they want to go with the ball. Well, they want to go 10 to 18 in between the numbers. That was the sweet spot the first 2 years. It went off a cliff the last 2 years. And that's because they would clog that area of the field with defenders and coverage. They gave you a lot more throws outside the numbers and said, hey, we're going to force you to drive this ball to the field on a 15-yard out. And we don't think you can hit that throw with consistency. And too often teams were right. And that's where you really saw the efficiency of the offense drop off. was not being able to have those complementary throws. And I think that's a really fascinating foil with McCarthy, because a lot of his volume came outside the numbers. So like it would,
which is not what O'Connell wanted. There was a tension there that I think that he wants to get McCarthy to throw over the middle more and to become that kind of guy. But it is funny because deep and outside the numbers was not his thing in college at all.
Yeah.
And then that's like all they went for. So it was all very backwards. Okay. So let's talk about arm strength, because that's like the noodle arm thing has always been Tua's bugaboo. It's been the thing that's haunted him since he came into my consciousness, which was the NFL draft. I guess there's two reasons for it that I think of, because when I watch him throw, I don't see that torque and rotation that you see with other quarterbacks. I would call him I would call him not that flexible of a quarterback. And that might be, I wasn't watching him before his hip problem at Alabama. So maybe that is just that injury there's some scar tissue or something, then it's just not going to be as flexible as it was. But there's also the lefty thing. And I can't, this is the weird conspiracy. I can't stop thinking about it. It's because he's righty on everything else, and he only is a lefty because that's how his dad taught him to throw when he was a very little kid. And it's like a cross dominance thing. Like it's got me Googling like neurology papers. I'm fascinated by this. Is there anything to him, just the way that he learned, leading to like less body control, less coordination, just because he's doing it with his offhand, with his natural offhand, even though, when you learn that young, it becomes the way you do it. And I guess the question at the central part of it is that in any way fixable if you get him into a building where, despite what happened last year, Kevin O'Connell still has this reputation as a guy that'll fix your quarterback.
Yeah, it's tough because this was a guy who had to take jiu-jitsu to learn how to fall down. Right?
Right.
Is the same
Protecting
guy.
himself is huge. Hey, we got a guy with that problem too, and he got his own concussion.
So that's, anytime that Tua has had a great success, it's because he has committed his entire offseason program to that thing. And in 2022, it was after 2022, it was the Tua jitsu and adding weight. And then he came in 15 pounds heavier and denser, and he took the classes how to fall. And you're watching the preseason games, and he's tucking the chin, and he's jiu-jitsu rolling out of contact. And it's like, that looks great. Lo and behold, he stayed healthy for 17 games. Then the next offseason, it was, he got the contract, but it was, I felt too heavy. I felt like I couldn't move. So he wanted to lean down and get more twitchy and work on outside of structure stuff. And he actually was better in 24 outside of structure than what he was in 2023. But he also had one opportunity in the open field where he tried to run somebody over and it put him on IR for a month. And it was like, you're not really built to play that brand of football. You sign on the dotted line in his contract, huh? and you do it. And that felt like it was the fracturing point for everybody involved. Was everybody kind of put their neck out there and they said, hey, he did all the right things in 23. We won 11 games. He signs his contract, and the first opportunity to play smart, he tries to run somebody over, and we lose him for a month. And it cost him the playoffs in 2024 because they end up finishing 8-9. They lost a couple of games where they could not even like complete forward passes, like the Tennessee game, and Tennessee was awful. They finished with the number 1 overall pick.
Was it Skylar Thompson?
It was Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle, and Snoop Huntley. Snoop Huntley started the week 5 game, and he'd been on the roster for 2 weeks. And Mike's up there at the podium after the game talking, Tyler's never thrown no-hit shin breakers before. And that opened up a whole other can of worms about why you asked him to throw no-hit shin breakers for your game plan if he's never done that before. But that's neither here nor there with that's the challenging thing for Tua is you do see some of the warts with the frame of mind of Mike and then the shortcomings with the passing game structure. And it's like, man, like you really do wonder if he were to have an opportunity to kind of retrain and recapture some of that sturdiness of the 23 season, and he got in a different passing game structure, even if it was just tweaked a little bit. Like, could he be a sufficient level starter in the NFL? He's got the experience to do so. I think still think he's exceptionally accurate when he's right with his mechanics, but it's just way too often that, to your point, that rotation and that working from the ground up hasn't been there for him. And he reverted back into those old habits this year worse than he has in the last several seasons.
And maybe the calendar here is the biggest hurdle, because with what you said earlier, the summer, like if this isn't getting done till the summer, he spends his whole offseason in kind of limbo, not knowing who he's going to play for and what that person wants. Then you don't get to spend your whole offseason on a specific directive. Unless you're the one making it yourself, and who knows what he wants to prioritize and how he feels.
Right.
So this is all very fascinating. I want to put a bow on this, but also talk to you a little bit about Frank Smith and what he might bring to the Vikings. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. If you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel has got you. Here's what you got to do. Use your profit boost on any NBA future right now. We're just coming out of the All-Star break, so this is a great time for futures. Who's going to end up with the best win-loss records, player futures, who's going to win the Western Conference, stuff like that. If you use your profit boost on it, you will automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. Flights, tickets, the whole shebang. If you're already looking at the board and you're thinking, I think I know where Anthony Edwards is going to end up or where Naz Reid is going to end up, you can think about which team can make a deep run. Whatever it is, it's a perfect time to lock it in and make sure you use that profit boost on it. Now, not only can your pick cash and you can actually win a bet and be happy with that like it usually would be, it could also send you to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. So to put a bow on this stuff with Tua, it feels to me like if Kevin O'Connell let me know just what you think of this scenario for him and how you feel he would work.
Yeah.
If Kevin O'Connell got his hands on Tua, he would probably want Tua to become more rotational. And maybe that would become something that happens after the first year. Because I don't think you're trading for Tua and then spending all that money for a 1-year rental. I think you'd probably mess with the contract a little bit, but ultimately he probably would have a pretty good chance to see the money that's like scheduled to him in 2027, but maybe converted into a signing bonus or more of it guaranteed and spread out across years or something, about a little more provisional. But I don't think that this would be an attempt to make Tua your guy, to have Tua be the next Sam Darnold that, has his big bounce back. And I think that he would look at Tua and say, sweet, I can run these backside digs to Justin Jefferson all the time. We've got speed with Addison. I think whether it's Naylor or somebody else, whoever wide receiver 3 is, I think would be fast as well. They also have Ty Felton, who they drafted in the 3rd round last year, hoping he takes a step. He ran like a 4.3 something. So they have that speed, and maybe we can, push him into being aggressive again. Hopefully we can block it up. Use a lot of play action and roll out and stuff, especially rolling to his left because he's a lefty. You can kind of attack defenses in that way that might be a little awkward for them that they're less used to, because you can do rollouts to the other side and still have that natural mechanic. And try to get him back to being a push the ball downfield quarterback. Do you see that working out, or do you see there just being too many problems with this, especially if this can't process until June 1st. And we can't know about it until June 1st. So Tua can't work on the rotation all offseason because he doesn't know if he's going to be a Viking until June.
Yeah, I think if Tua is going about his business right, he is attacking the physical element of this offseason already. Now, he has not, like, his QB coach growing up with was his dad. And then it was that same 23 offseason, he worked with 3D QB, which is out west. And he did, like, per the request of the Dolphins, after 2022, he worked with that that throwing coach.
Right. Which he's worked with Stafford. He's worked with Bryce Young. I just wrote a thing about and like Brady, man, like a huge list of alumni in that. That's not just some random company. Yeah. Yeah.
And the individual coach that he actually worked with is John Beck, who's a former Dolphins draft choice, second round draft choice in the late 2000s. So that sounded like it went away and he stopped doing that. So I think you saw kind of the speed of the clock that he had in his head, and you saw kind of just the deterioration of the twitchy, because he did have kind of pocket twitchiness earlier in his career. He didn't have it this year. And it felt like he really struggled to get his feet set up to throw. If he's doing his business right, he's working on that regardless. And then I think that can have some translatability to the scenario in which you're talking about. But the best thing about Tua when he was throwing deep was it was footwork, hitch, throw. Like if it's anything beyond within the rhythm of the drop, that's where those balls hung up in the air and they become these contested targets. And the good news is with the speed that he's used to throwing to, if you have speed receivers and you're able to facilitate those pre-snap looks where he knows, hey, let me confirm which way the safety's going, and then I'll get to the top of the drop and I'll rip one of these down the field. He can do that, and you can have winners on the outside. And that's where he wins when you're going to throw the ball downfield, is within the rhythm of the drop.
Because we've got a couple minutes here, I would love to ask you about Frank Smith. And the main question I have about Frank Smith, just because I don't know how things were put together in Miami, was what about Miami can I attribute to him that he'll bring over? I know he's touted as like a run game guy, and there's a lot of really cool like motion stuff in the run game. I thought Miami, even when it wasn't working, I thought they had some really cool ideas and you could see what they were going for. Was that Frank Smith, or was Frank Smith just a facilitator for all of Mike McDaniel's ideas? Not unlike what it's like in Minnesota, where there's Wes Phillips, he's the OC, but really he's doing just a lot of legwork and stuff, and Kevin O'Connell's the mastermind.
If you can find out what Frank Smith did in Miami, I would love for you to tell me.
Okay.
It was Darrell Bevell was the pass game coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. It was Frank Smith as the offensive coordinator. Mike McDaniel was the head coach and the play caller. Mm-hmm. And then they brought in Bobby Slowick. And it was like, we're actually going to make Bobby the senior pass game coordinator, and Darrell Bevell's still going to be the pass game coordinator, and Frank Smith's still going to be the offensive coordinator, and Mike's still going to be the offensive. Like,
holy cooks in the kitchen.
It was like, who knows? Now, the vast majority of like the wild, wonky formations and offensive formation shifts and all the guys in the backfield that creates all the misdirect, like a lot of that is generally assumed to be Mike McDaniel. I will say that the best tangible feel that I had of Frank Smith in 4 years was after the debacle this year against the Browns. Frank Smith left the box and he went down on the sideline, and he was hands-on with the players because he's not the play caller, right? So he's free to do that as the offensive coordinator who's not the play caller. And he's helping with the coordination of personnel packages and the points of emphasis for the individual units.
Like organizing, making sure everybody's in the right place, making sure the right 11 guys go out there.
Correct. That was the biggest physical feel of a game that I felt for Frank Smith. Was they went down to Atlanta and they smoked the Falcons. And it was like, where did this come from? And it was like, oh yeah, Frank left the box and was in the guys' ears throughout the course of the game, and they really enjoyed having him down there. And then he talked about the difference of getting down on the field. So, but as far as the actual design, game plan, your guess is as good as mine on where Frank Smith's responsibility started and stopped in his 4 years in Miami.
There's a lot of information in that sequence of that Browns game and then that Atlanta game.
Yeah.
Because if that Atlanta game was the one where Tua played with one eye, right?
Yes.
Where he had what people think maybe is pink eye or some kind of problem where his eye was swollen shut. Yeah, the visor and all that. And so there's another like handedness thing that I'm going to go way too deep on and then write a stupid article. That like, if he, like most right-handed people also have right eye dominance. It's not a huge majority. It's like 65%. But like if one eye was closed and he got to like be like focus more with like eye dominance, like that could help. Like there's a real vision argument to be made about that. But only, a select few people will ever know what's actually going on with his health, and especially like cognition and vision after all the concussions and all that stuff. Obviously that is going to be super, super, super secret, probably until the end of time. So speculating on it is only for funsies. And I don't think we can draw any real conclusions. But Kyle, Thank you so much. This answered so many of my questions. I feel like I have a much better grasp on what this situation can be. And I really do think, even though there's reasons that I don't love it as an idea, I really do think the Vikings are going to like it more than I do. And if they're looking for a trade partner, the Vikings could be it. Because the other thing about the Vikings is there's no GM right now. Rob Brzezinski, who's the cap guy, is the interim GM. He's probably the one making the final say on all of these decisions. But right now, like, the beat doesn't even know if he wants the long-term job, let alone if he's going to get it. So I don't know who's actually making this call, and this would be a long-term call. But if it's Kevin O'Connell, who brought in a guy who's been in Miami for 4 years, clearly wants to emulate and has always wanted to emulate what Miami does on offense. He has stolen so much stuff from Mike McDaniel over the years. It feels like we might be trending toward a guy who has a lot of personnel control and wants this. So I think a phone call is going to happen. But we'll stay tuned. Maybe I'll have you back on the show if something does materialize. Kyle, thank you so much. You can find Kyle at Locked On Dolphins. And what else are you up to now? It's draft season. I'm sure you're.
Yeah, I'm with A to Z Sports doing a lot of draft content and player profiles there.
Excellent. Kyle, thank you so much. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.